Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The dagger hit the mahogany desk with a dull, heavy thud, vibrating just inches from the divorce papers. "Sign it," Lord Valerius Thorne said, his voice a calm ripple over a deep ocean, though his white silk shirt was rapidly staining crimson at the shoulder. "You wanted your freedom, Duke Varric. I am giving it to you. My blood has bought out the contract." Grand Duke Kalen Varric, the Empire's most feared general, the Wolf of the North, stared at the slender man standing before him. For 6 months, Kalen had treated Valerius like a ghost haunting his hallways, an unwanted burden, a political shackle forced upon him by a jealous emperor. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He had expected the weak, fragile Omega the rumors had described. He had not expected Valerius to walk into his study at 3 in the morning, half dead from an assassin's blade meant for Kalen, demanding a divorce with the same icy precision of an executioner. "You're bleeding," Kalen said, his voice rough, the alpha in him reacting instinctively to the scent of metallic copper and distressed Omega pheromones. "I am aware," Valerius replied, his legs trembling slightly, though his chin remained high. "The assassin is dead in the courtyard. Your guards were sleeping. I suggest you fire them." He pushed the papers forward with a blood-smeared finger. "Sign. Then I will leave, and you can marry your beloved countess. I am done being the shield for a man who wishes me dead. To understand the blood on the desk, one must understand the ice in the bed." 6 months prior, the marriage between the House of Varric and the fallen House of Thorne had been the scandal of the season. Kalen Varric was an Alpha Prime, a war hero, a man carved from granite and violence. Valerius Thorne was an Omega of 26, ancient by capital standards, and rumors clung to him like soot. They said he was defective. They said his scent glands were damaged, that he could not bear children, that he was cold and unfeeling. The Emperor, fearing Kalen's rising popularity, had orchestrated the union. It was a calculated insult. By shackling the Empire's strongest wolf to a broken, barren creature, he hoped to humiliate Kalen. And Kalen had taken the bait. He hated the marriage. He hated the Emperor. And, by proximity, he hated Valerius. On their wedding night, Kalen had walked into the bridal chamber, still wearing his military dress uniform. Valerius sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in his lap, wearing a traditional white ceremonial robe that looked too large for his slender frame. Kalen didn't even close the door. "Let us be clear, Lord Thorne," he had said, his voice stripping the air from the room. "This is a prison, not a marriage. You will have your wing of the estate. I will have mine. You will not speak to me unless spoken to. You will not enter my study. And you will certainly never share my bed." Valerius had looked up. His eyes were a startling shade of violet, rare and disarming. There was no fear in them, only a weary resignation. "Understood, Your Grace. I require only a library card and a garden. The rest, you may keep." Kalen had slammed the door and left. He spent the night with his mistress, a display of disrespect so public it made the tabloids the next morning. For months, Valerius kept his word. He was a phantom in the Varric estate. He was polite to the servants who sneered at him. He ate his meals alone. He managed the household budget from the shadows, fixing the financial leaks Kalen's incompetence with coin had created, all without asking for credit. But the silence was a lie. Valerius was not broken. He was dormant. The change began on a rainy Tuesday in late autumn. Kalen had returned from the border, exhausted and irritable. His rut was approaching, that time of quarter year when an alpha's biology demanded release, aggression, and possession. Usually, he locked himself in the underground bunker. But this time, the fever hit early. Kalen collapsed in the main foyer, his pheromones exploding outward like a physical blast wave. It smelled of ozone, burnt wood, and terrifying, raw power. Servants scrambled, choking on the density of the air. Betas fainted. Valerius appeared at the top of the stairs. He didn't cover his nose. He didn't cringe. He walked down the marble steps with a measured grace, a glass of water and 2 white pills in his hand. "Clear the hall," Valerius ordered. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a command that made the head butler freeze. Now, the servants fled. Valerius knelt beside the writhing alpha. Kalen's eyes were blown wide, black consuming the iris. He snarled, a guttural sound that would have sent a lesser man running. Get away. Drink this, Valerius said, bringing the glass to Kalen's lips. It's a suppressant. High grade. Kalen lashed out, his hand gripping Valerius's wrist tight enough to bruise bone. I said, leave. I could kill you. You could, Valerius agreed, not flinching as his wrist turned purple under the grip. But you won't. Because you are a soldier, not a beast. Control yourself, Varric. The use of his surname, spoken with such calm authority, pierced the haze of the rut. Kalen stared at the Omega. Up close, he could smell him. Valerius didn't smell like nothing, as the rumors claimed. He smelled faint, subtle, like old paper and winter frost. It was cooling, soothing. Kalen drank the water. He took the pills. And then, exhausted by the chemical war in his blood, he slumped forward, resting his forehead against Valerius's chest. For 10 minutes, they stayed there on the cold floor. The unwanted husband held the wolf of the north, running long, slender fingers through the Duke's sweat-dampened hair. Why? Kalen rasped, his sanity returning. Why help me? Because, Valerius whispered, I know what it is like to be trapped inside your own body. The next morning, Kalen woke up in his own bed. Valerius was gone. But on the nightstand, there was a tube of bruise cream and a note. Asterisk, your schedule is cleared for 3 days. Rest, asterisk. It was the first crack in the ice. Kalen began to watch him. He noticed how Valerius fixed the hems of the maids' uniforms when they tore. He noticed how the garden, once dead, was blooming with nightshade and aconite, poisons disguised as flowers. He noticed that Valerius spent hours in the library, not reading romance novels, but studying ancient treatises on border law and toxicology. Why would a broken Omega study poisons? The answer came at the Emperor's winter ball. It was a trap, of course. The Emperor had invited them to humiliate Kalen again, to show off the miserable couple. Kalen wore his dress blacks. Valerius wore a suit of midnight blue velvet, high-collared and severe. As they entered the ballroom, whispers followed them like a swarm of wasps. Look at him, a baroness tittered behind her fan. The Baron Thorn. They say the Duke sleeps in the stables just to avoid him. Kalen stiffened. He felt a growl rising in his chest, surprising himself. Why did he care? Then, Count Rylan, a sycophant of the Emperor, approached them holding a glass of wine. Rylan was a slimy beta who thought his proximity to the throne gave him immunity. Duke Varric, Rylan smirked. And, Lord Thorn, I must say, you look remarkably healthy for a man whose line ends with him. The insult was gross, direct. Kalen stepped forward, his hand drifting to where his sword would be, but Valerius placed a hand on Kalen's forearm. Count Rylan, Valerius said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the music. I hear your wife recently gave birth to twins. Congratulations. Rylan puffed up. Indeed. Strong sons. Strange, Valerius mused, tilting his head. Given that you have been stationed in the Southern Isles for 11 months, and human gestation is but 9, the biology of your house must be fascinatingly rapid. The music stopped. The silence was absolute. Rylan turned purple. The entire court began to murmur, then snicker. Valerius had just publicly accused the Count's wife of infidelity, armed with nothing but math and a sweet smile. Valerius took a sip of champagne. But perhaps I am mistaken. I am, after all, just a defective Omega. Kalen stared at his husband. For the first time, he didn't see a burden. He saw a weapon. A beautiful, sharp, terrifying weapon. He felt a stir in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. He moved his hand, covering Valerius's fingers on his arm. Let us dance, husband. Valerius looked at him, startled. I do not dance, your grace. Tonight, Kalen said, pulling him onto the floor, you do. They moved together stiffly at first. Valerius was rigid, expecting mockery. But Kalen held him close, his large hand spanning the small of Valerius's back. You knew about Rylan, Kalen murmured as they turned. Everyone knew. No one said it. Valerius replied, looking at Kalen's cravat rather than his eyes. You have a sharp tongue, Valerius. A shield, your grace. Since you refused to provide one. The words hit Kalen like a physical blow. He pulled Valerius closer, inhaling that scent of frost and paper. I have been blind. Blindness is curable, Valerius said softly. Stupidity is not. Do not mistake this dance for forgiveness, Kalen. It was the first time he had used Kalen's given name. It sent a shiver down the alpha's spine. But the night was not destined to end in romance. As they left the palace, the attack happened. Arrows rained down from the rooftops. It was a clumsily executed ambush, likely hired by the humiliated Count Rylan, or perhaps even the Emperor himself to finish the job. Get down, Kalen roared, shoving Valerius into the carriage. But Valerius didn't stay down. As Kalen drew a hidden dagger to fend off the attackers, he saw Valerius moving, not cowering. The Omega had pulled a hairpin from his locks, a long, wicked silver needle. An attacker lunged for the carriage door. Valerius drove the needle into the man's neck with surgical precision. The man dropped instantly. Carotid artery, Valerius noted calmly, though his hands shook. Efficient. They fought back-to-back in the narrow street. Kalen was a whirlwind of brute force, but Valerius was the shadow, tripping enemies, using their momentum against them, striking nerve clusters. But there were too many. An arrow flew from the darkness, aimed straight for Kalen's heart. He didn't see it. He was engaged with two swordsmen. Valerius saw it. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He threw himself across Kalen's back. The arrow struck. Valerius gasped, a wet, choking sound. The world seemed to stop for Kalen. He turned, catching his husband as he fell. The arrow was lodged in Valerius's shoulder, deep. Valerius, Kalen roared, a sound of pure devastation. The alpha energy exploded from him, this time not in a rut, but in a murderous rage. He slaughtered the remaining assassins in seconds, a blur of violence. He carried Valerius into the estate, shouting for medics. He held the bleeding Omega, terrified by the amount of blood soaking his dress shirt. Why? Kalen whispered, pressing a cloth to the wound. You hate me. Valerius looked up, his eyes hazy. I do not hate you, Kalen. I hate that you made me love you when you never wanted me. Valerius lost consciousness. And that brings us to the study. Valerius had survived the surgery. The arrow had missed the lung by millimeters. But the moment he could stand, 3 days later, he had gone to the library, retrieved the divorce papers he had prepared months ago, and marched into Kalen's study. Back in the present, Kalen stared at the blood dripping from Valerius's reopened wound onto the carpet. I am not signing these, Kalen said, his voice low. You must, Valerius swayed. I have served my purpose. I saved your life. The debt is paid. Let me go. No. Kalen stood up. He walked around the desk. Valerius tried to step back, but his legs finally gave out. Kalen caught him. He lifted the Omega into his arms, ignoring the blood staining his own clothes. Put me down, Valerius whispered weakly. I am unwanted. You said so. I lied. Kalen buried his face in Valerius's neck, inhaling the scent that was now laced with pain, but underneath was pure, sweet jasmine, the scent of a soulmate finally revealing itself under duress. I was a fool. I was angry at the world, and I punished you for it. You are not unwanted, Valerius. You are vital. You are my breath. Pretty words, Valerius scoffed, though he leaned into the warmth. You are just guilty. Is it guilt that makes me want to burn the world for touching you? Kalen growled against his skin. Is it guilt that makes me want to kneel and beg for a chance to court my own husband? Valerius went still. Court. Properly this time, Kalen promised. He carried Valerius toward the door, kicking it open. I will rip up these papers. I will fire the guards. I will destroy Count Rylan. And then, I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving that you are the only thing I have ever wanted. I'm expensive, Valerius murmured, his eyes fluttering shut as the adrenaline faded. And difficult. I have the treasury, Kalen kissed his forehead. And I like a challenge. Kalen carried him not to the guest wing, but to the master bedroom. He laid Valerius on the silk sheets, the same bed he had banned him from months ago. As he began to dress the wound with gentle, trembling hands, Kalen looked at the pale face of the man who had saved him. The Emperor had meant to give him a curse. Instead, he had given him a king. Sleep, my heart, Kalen whispered into the darkness. When you wake up, the war is over. The chase begins. Valerius didn't answer. He was already asleep. but his hand, limp and pale, had unconsciously curled around Kalen's thumb. And for the first time in his life, the Wolf of the North didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a home. And that is how the unwanted husband became the emperor of the Duke's heart. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius bring a powerful alpha to his knees with nothing but wit and a needle, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Kalen, or would you have forced him to sign the papers and walked away? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,